and welcome to the rare afternoon, early evening edition of RedRecover.com Inside the Paint. Today, Kurt is well rested out there. Kurt Helin from Pro Basketball Talk and NBCSports.com out there in LA. Didn't have to get up the crack of dawn. The dog has probably been walked and fed by now, so everyone should be in better shape out there. He's in LA. I'm Ira Winderman from the South Florida Sun-Sentinel. I'm up here in Portland, where the Heat are going to play the Blazers tonight. And I guess because of the timing a little bit, Kurt, I have some news. Usually I'm just waking up like you are and starting our show typically on Wednesdays at 9 a.m. Went to the Heat shoot around today. Omar Yurtseven is with the Heat traveling, but both Eric Spoelstra and Omer said probably still a week away. He hurt his ankle in the preseason opener against Minnesota, said it was hurting a little bit in the Bahamas, so he won't be on this trip. Back for the Heat after their suspension, Caleb Martin and Nikola Jovic. They missed Monday's game against the Toronto Raptors, so they're back in the mix. And Victor Oladipo is still in the wind, and I will get into that with Kurt a little bit more as we go on. Still that knee issue, opposite knee from his surgical knee. He is not out here with the Miami Heat, so a little bit of Heat news today. Martin and Jovic glad to be back. Jovic hasn't played yet this season. So I sort of want to get the man who does the rankings and knows the league and sort of talking all around the league. I find it interesting because a lot of people have done power rankings, look at the Miami Heat 1-3 record, and some still have them high because they do more of a overall season projection. Others simply go by the moment and the Heat's down at number 24 or something like that because they've had a really crappy opening week. So Kurt Helin from Pro Basketball Talk and NBCSports.com, when you look at the 1-3 Heat, are you looking at them through a prism of a team that is in trouble or of a team that's just played 4 games and will find its way?
More the latter. Like there are concerning stuff out of the defense not being elite and being able to carry this team from day one is a little concerning. The offense, I kind of figured the offense will find its way, but the defense has always been the anchor for this franchise, and it's been okay. Actually, you've seen the numbers probably. It's really actually great when Bam Adebayo is on the court, but the second he steps off, that defense really struggles, and that's a tough way to go. Like they've got to find a way to get some stops while he's out and keep games in touch, especially against, like you said, the Warriors are their own story, but it's a really good Portland team right now that's full of confidence and playing really well. So, yeah, I think they figure it out, but we've talked about this, Ira. The West is deep. The East is ridiculously deep.
Yes.
And if you stumble out of the gate and you get to 2-6 or something, it just becomes harder and harder to make that ground up the farther you go. You can't let this year in particular, you can't let the early stumbles last.
Yeah, and you know what? Especially when you have a team with persnickety players, there I said persnickety, and Jimmy Butler and Kyle Lowry, where I think it festers with guys like that. They don't like losing. I'm not saying they're looking to turn and blame others when certainly Kyle can look inward with the way he played over the first week, but it starts building on itself. So you have the Blazers tonight, 4-0, good start. Damian Lillard looks healthy again. Anthony Simons all of a sudden making us realize why they let CJ McCollum go, that this guy is the next wave for Portland. So he's playing well. The backcourt, whether it was a McCollum and Lillard backcourt or now what they have, still a top scoring backcourt. Tomorrow, Golden State, I think we all know who the Warriors are. I'm not worried about the losses to Denver or Phoenix. They're the Golden frickin' State Warriors. They still have a death line every time they take the court. Then Saturday, the Heat concludes this trip against the Sacramento Kings, who thought they were going to be better, still looking for their first win, but obviously that's a home game for them also. So I want to sort of get to a little bit of the root cause of why the Heat are 1-3. And so many of my readers of the Sun-Sentinel have pointed in this direction. Kurt, you pointed it at the start of the season also. We tried to give logic and reason to the loss of P.J. Tucker, to the small lineup. Caleb Martin has started 3 of the games at power forward. Then Max Strus, formerly known as a shooting guard, started basically in place of Caleb Martin in the Monday loss to Toronto. The league isn't necessarily big, and teams that are playing big aren't necessarily thriving. But Kurt, over an 82-game season, is going this small a losing proposition?
Usually just because the best teams combine skill and a little bit of size. You look at the easy example is Boston, where they can roll out 2 wings who are, off the top of my head, 6'5" and 6'7", whatever they are.
Right.
It becomes hard to go small against the best teams, and it does physically wear on you after a while. I mean, it's a bump and grind season, and it kind of depends on the person. Some guys, Kyle Lowry, he's had his injury issues lately, but like built like a tank. Like he's kind of able to absorb some of this more than other guys. But eventually I think it does wear. I still think you need a certain amount of size and bulk. And I don't mean like it's time to roll Mark Eaton back out there, but like you need a certain amount of size and bulk.
I know you're going old school on us. And yet I think when I look at Dwayne Dedmon, it's like as if we have Mark Eaton at his current age right now. Or I think did Mark Eaton pass? Matter of fact, I got to be careful. I don't want to be that guy. So yeah, I think I'm going to leave that one alone. Okay, what I'm saying is Dwayne Dedmon, and I will leave it just as that right now, is struggling. And when he comes in with the second unit, so you can say go bigger, but there's only 3 ways that he can go bigger. That he can go bigger, you're playing Bam Adebayo. They could play Bam and Omer Yurtseven together. Well, right now, Omer Yurtseven's out with the ankle injury. Like I said at the top of our redrecover.com Inside the Paint. Probably not till next week when the Warriors visit next Tuesday. You can play Bam and Dwayne Dedmon together, but you can't because it's hard enough for Dwayne to be a center, let alone him switching a little bit with Bam Adebayo. He doesn't have the mobility. Or you can play Bam and Nikola Jovic together. But again, you're talking about a 19-year-old playing alongside 36-year-old Jimmy Butler, 36-year-old Kyle Lowry, and 33-year-old Jimmy Butler, who might not have the patience for a kid either. So you're sort of coming back to the Caleb Martin or bust type of approach. To me, this is more roster construction. And folks, I know it, and Zachary, you've already chimed in here on our YouTube chat board. I agree the Heat are undersized. I think the Heat knew they were undersized. I think the Heat thought they can come up with a style that can compensate by their saying crash the boards and all that. And yet what you've seen over the first few games, because the Heat are trying to crash the boards, especially the offensive boards, the other team's off to the races. They're not covering the backcourt. It's not 2 back on the release anymore. It's trying to make up for something. So, Kurt, what I think happens is this stuff starts building and building and building on itself, because when you play small in one position, you're asking your small forward, your shooting guard, your point guard to get more involved on the boards. God bless him, Tyler Hero did the other day, tied his career high with his 15 rebounds. But if you're asking Tyler Hero to be your leading rebounder, you're probably playing at a deficit in the first place anyway. So issue number 1 for the Heat, I think, is playing small, whether they can figure it out. Issue number 2, and I've written a few stories about this in the Sun Sentinel, and to his credit, Kyle Lowry was very candid after the game. Anthony Chang, the Miami Herald, and myself were the only ones who waited him out when he was dressing and said basically he has to be better. It's not working right now. Kurt, and again, I'm putting you on the spot. I don't like when people do this to me also, so I'll let you think about it as I finish the question. Older players who have struggled, some of them do hit an expiration date, and you realize they're just not the same players. Other players change their game. Chris Paul's the perfect example, and becomes what you need and makes up with it with his savvy, what maybe he doesn't have in the athleticism. From the limited sample size we've seen of Kyle Lowry, 2 okay games, 2 absolutely awful games so far to this point. Should we be concerned about Kyle Lowry at 36, or is he sort of part of the wave of smart enough to figure it out point guards?
I think he's smart enough to figure it out. I think the question is more, is he willing to accept it? Is he willing to accept the limitations that he's kind of under now and who he is as a player and adjust to that? For some of these guys, and look, he missed obviously a ton of time last season, so the physical side is there, but it's more mental, right? It's more. I was watching the Laker Clipper game the opening night, and it's like, hey, here's John Wall. He looks explosive. By the way, happy to come off the bench, keep a limited role. Let me just do what I want to do, but fit me in, as opposed to Russell Westbrook's not fitting in, and that's a whole other conversation. But I think you see that in a lot of places. Is Kyle ready to accept that, Ira?
I think Kyle is ready to accept everything now that he has his 3-year, $85 million contract. I think he's willing to be anything to anyone because he cashed in. And I don't mean that he's quitting on it because he had his contract. But I think Kyle realizes, I don't want to phrase it exactly this way, but this sort of is his final resting place, that this is his last big deal. This is going to be the end of it. No one's going to come up with one more deal at 38 years old. So He should be that. He's also very stubborn. The other part of it is, and I want to get into this, and C. Dollar brought this up just now on our chat board also, I think it's been harder for Jimmy and Kyle and Bam because Tyler Hero's in the starting lineup. Now, you might say to me, whoa, Ira, you're an idiot. And plenty of people can say that and go on the chat board if you want. But Tyler has put up numbers that show he's played well and deserves the starting role. But, Kurt, what I posit to you is this, and you've seen this on some Laker teams and other teams, sometimes concentrated talent in a lineup is not necessarily the best way to go. And sometimes when you have too many mouths to feed, those who go hungry wind up being lesser players. Tyler likes himself a shot. Tyler Hero is not shy about shooting the ball. Tyler Hero will do some of those Damian Lillard 28-foot pulls when he feels the moment. Well, that means fewer, less, whatever grammar you want to use, opportunities for Bam Adebayo, for Kyle Lowry, and for Jimmy Butler. The reason I'm bringing this up is I think it relates to Kyle Lowry for this reason. Kyle's fine with that. He played off the ball when Toronto won a 2019 championship with Fred VanVleet and Pascal Siakam and, of course, Kawhi Leonard taking the majority of shots. But what this team needs is Tyler being that Tyler and Kyle being the best version of Kyle. And I don't know if I can get that, if they can get that in the starting lineup. So, Kurt, I know you don't coach NBA teams, but in your columns, you've coached them. So I'll throw it to you this way. From what you know about NBA strategy, but more than that, what you know about NBA ego, is there any way, if the Heat lose tonight, 1-4, if the Heat lose tomorrow, I'm not being negative, folks, I'm just saying in case, hypothetical, lose tomorrow to Golden State, which is probable, 1-5, something like that. Is there a point that Eric Spoelstra can go to Tyler Hero and going, hey, you were sixth man of the year. We got off to a much better start last year. We need to reset this thing. Is that doable? Or sort of once Tyler has tasted the forbidden fruit of starting, is it a completely different situation and a completely different Tyler?
Obviously, I think that depends player to player. Like what does Eric Spoelstra do? Invite him into his office and say, I'd like you to look at these Manu Ginobili clips. Like, I don't know how some guys are willing to accept that role. And you might know better than I about Tyler's personality, but much like you mentioned about Kyle Lowry, Tyler's got his payday. He's not fighting for the starting spot and doing this now to get a bigger payday. He's locked in at a really nice price over the next, he will be well compensated over the next 5 years.
Yeah, I just,
with that there, is he comfortable or is it still an ego thing? And I'm just talking to you, my vibe is more the latter.
Yeah, I think it is. Tyler wants to be the it thing. He wants to be the one. He wants to be noticed. He has the swag every time he walks into the arena, and the Heat make sure they show that swag, on the team's Instagram and Twitter and social media accounts because they know it matters to him. He wants to be up front. He wants the cameras to pan the starters and for him to be out there. It's important for him. The Heat knew it's important for him. And let's face it, the Heat gave him a $130 million contract so that he could be that player. So I just think it's a very fine line right now. But I think if you also want Bam Adebayo to get up a bunch of shots, 15, 17, he says that 18-shot range, and you don't want to take the ball out of Jimmy Butler's hand, I think it's getting very difficult for me to slice up that pie chart. And the only way I can do it is to slice out Kyle Lowry's portion of the pie chart. And you paid him $85 million over 3 seasons. I need him to be more than part-time facilitator and guy who leads to the pass that leads to the pass and getting hockey assists. I didn't pay Kyle Lowry for hockey assists. I paid him to be the general to get the team the best possible shots, not to help other guys create their own offense. So I thought from the get-go they were stuck there. And I thought from the start it just didn't work. I know you had to pay him. I know you can't give up talent. I know we both sit here and I think we'd agree, Eric Spoelstra, great coach, he will figure it out. And I agree with that. But you still can see in this rotation, and here's why I bring this up, Kurt. You need more than 5 players to win an NBA game. You have to get something off of your bench as well. Yeah. Now, you don't know that covering the Lakers because they barely have more than 2 players, but most NBA teams, you need
Philadelphia right now. Yeah.
Philadelphia is another thing. You can talk about Daniel House all you want and things like that, but you need a little bit more. Right. So the point is, when you look at this Heat second unit with Tyler not in there and with Victor Oladipo not in there, who are the shot creators? I mean, if you're playing Gabe Vincent as your point guard, you're playing Duncan Robinson and you're playing Max Strus, maybe you're throwing in some Haywood Highsmith and you're Dwayne Dedmon. I mean, okay, let's stop for a second because I want to get perspective here, okay? I'm going to give you a starting lineup, a lineup that the Heat could go to with their second unit, okay? Dwayne Dedmon, Haywood Highsmith, Duncan Robinson, Max Strus, and Gabe Vincent. That's a lottery team, isn't it? That's a G League team, isn't it? And that's what the Heat are throwing out. I know they cycle through guys, but when you're talking about a quote-unquote bench right now, is that anything, let alone is it enough? And if not you, the dog can answer also. So either one can answer that one.
It really doesn't matter what time of day we do this. The dog is going to just run through the house, apparently.
And you know what? And until you get him the redrecover.com dog treatment, I think there's a reason why. But,
yeah, exactly.
Let's go back to the question.
That is not a great lineup because you don't have shot creation and you don't have lockdown defense either. But like, you've got you've got guys who can knock down shots. You've got Strus and guys who can get you points. But unless you're running some sort of Quinn Snyder Utah system, how are you generating the looks? This isn't. I mean, Miami does have its system, but it doesn't generate that kind of ball movement.
Well, Kurt, let me phrase it to you this way: Dwayne Dedmon, Haywood Highsmith, Duncan Robinson, Max Strus, Gabe Vincent. 4 shots left on the shot clock. You throw it to someone, and you tell us, get us a hoop or get a free throw. Who?
Duncan, I guess.
I mean, yes, he's trying to get to the rim. Maybe Max Strus. He plays with force. It's probably going to wind up Vincent. So as we end this segment, I want to bring up one last thing that I think ties this all together. Actually, it's a 2-pronged question. How long do you wait on Victor Oladipo? And the reason I ask is this. I could see Heat fans out there. I see it on the chat board. You can go, enough of this guy. Ira, the guy never plays. We have to move on. And then Ira tells you, but they gave him 2 years at $18 million, and they ain't getting a rebate on that either. So, Kurt, when you get in this situation, you've seen this like with a lot of teams. Should the Miami Heat continue to count on Victor Oladipo? Can the Heat count on Victor Oladipo?
We're 4 games into the season. It is too early to just chuck everything out. You've got to stick with your plan a little bit and see, and you banking on Oladipo giving you that bench help. I think unless they have inside information, I think you've got to wait a little bit. I think you're comfortable. Should they though? Pretty soon they've got to start looking around and figuring out what their other options are, whether that's bringing Tyler off the bench or if it's some other move. You're going to have to find that bench scoring and extra shot creation because right now you just don't have it. It's kind of Jimmy and Tyler and occasionally Lowry with the front unit. Which
is why after the break on Inside the Paint, brought to you by redrecover.com, we'll talk about trade items, trade issues. Chris Haynes reported on the Jay Crowder situation last night on TNT's national telecast. As Kurt knows, out there in Lakerland, there's a rumor du jour every day out there. I want to throw in another one from Miami Heat perspective, so we'll see what's going on. So for all of you who are online and have the split screen, go to your trade machine. We'll throw some of those out there after this break on redrecover.com, Inside the Paint. I'm Ira Winderman from the South Florida Sun Sentinel out here in Portland, where the Heat will play the Trailblazers at 10 p.m. Eastern. He's Kurt Helin out in LA as usual from Pro Basketball Talk and NBCSports.com. We're on the redrecover.com Inside the Paint Show afternoon edition because Ira don't do mornings on the West Coast like Kurt. He's a champ. I'm not. And because Big O had to go off to the races today. Kurt, it's easy to say to make a trade. And I was watching on the elliptical this morning, and Stephen A. and Woj were on, and Stephen A. is throwing out 1,000 trade rumors, and Woj is going, you don't get trades this early in the season. It doesn't happen. Teams want to find out who they are, like who they are, or hope to be who they thought they were going to be. So I do think it's early, but I was watching the Suns last night beat the Golden State Warriors, and they were speaking again about Jay Crowder and his possibilities for a trade and how he's just sitting there. Phoenix could use another player, wants to get the right thing. Kurt, if you're the Miami Heat, do you throw a tangible asset at the Suns, including a future, maybe unprotected first-round pick, maybe a tangible thing like a Max Strus out there for a player in the final year of his contract in the 30s, or do you got to be a little more patient? And just tell us also, since you are on the West Coast, your thoughts on Jay Crowder. I don't want to say is a panacea, but just someone who not only in the moment, but for the season and the playoffs, be the right fit for this team?
I think he would be an improvement. I think to be honest with you, he's kind of a poor man's PJ Tucker. He has never been as good at everything as PJ Tucker is and what he brought to Miami, but he fills a lot of those same kind of roles and needs. And I think you hit the nail on the head, is a guy you can trust in the playoffs, is a guy who can, in big moments, you can count on. He has been there before. The trade rumors with him are kind of all over the place. I don't think the problem is, I don't think I don't think the Suns are really looking for, if you want to throw in a first round unprotected pick, they'll consider it, but that's still a win now team. I've got a whole story up today. I saw them against the Clippers. This is a team that is thinking, we won 64 games. We are not going to be defined by that ugly loss to Dallas. And whether you think that's true or not, that's where their head is. They are not thinking about what's next. They're thinking, hey, we've got Chris Paul. We can contend while we've got Chris Paul. That's a very limited window. We've got to do it now. So they're not really looking down the line. They want a guy back who can help them now. And while a Strus could do that, I don't know if I'm Miami. Am I there yet with Jay Crowder? I'm not sure yet that I am.
Reasonable. So I'm going to take it from the other perspective. And that's a really good take, Kurt, because when people are talking about a trade, it's got to be what the other team is looking for. This is not teams looking for draft choices who are making deals with the Lakers and trying to get theirs. This is a very much in the moment team. Like you said, Chris Paul, you don't know how much more of him there is going to be anyway before they move to their next incarnation. So let me throw it to you another way. I'll make the cap work after. We can get beyond that. I'll give some numbers. I'll call Andy Ellisberg on the cell phone here. We'll get him on the phone. So let's just look at this Heat roster. If I'm telling you the Heat are not trading Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo, and probably not trading Tyler Hero because they can't trade Tyler Hero, nor would they put him on the level of a trade for a Jay Crowder, and therefore Kyle Lowry has no interest to the Suns. They already have their 36, 38, 39-year-old point guard anyway. So those four are off the table. No Adebayo, no Lowry, no Hero, and no Butler. Who, if you are James Jones and you're looking at the Miami Heat roster and Andy Ellisberg calls in saying, hey, we want Jay Crowder. Can't be those four. Anyone else? Who do you want? Kurt Helin, is there anyone that the Suns would want?
The funny thing is, I think you might, depending on where they are in the season, but I think they might have an interest in a Caleb Martin type of player, like somebody that they could fit into their rotation and give them some depth at the four behind. Right now they're starting Cameron Johnson there. So I think that makes sense, but you can't trade him until
December 15th. Until December 15th, they used him in the biannual exception. Unlike the guys who got significant raises like Oladipo and Dedmon, they can't be traded till January 15th because they got more than a 20% raise. Caleb Martin's an interesting name there. Again, probably the same level viewed by many as a Jay Crowder right now. And this, again, and Kurt brings up a good point of why there aren't trades, because any player signed in the offseason cannot, as a free agent, cannot be traded until December 15th at the earliest. And any player signed with a significant raise who did not go into exception money can't be traded till January 15th. There's a reason the NBA trade market is so slow early in seasons. You have about a quarter of the league who is untradeable, let alone those guys with no trade clauses because they're veterans or it's implied in their contracts because they're one-year contracts on Larry Bird deals. So you have that in play also. So I think that's reasonable. So to backtrack here for a second, just forget the money. I'll make the money work. Magic Ira will make the money work. Max Strus for Jay Crowder.
Ooh.
Kurt?
The Suns might be into that just for the depth in the shooting. Their team so reliant on their shooting, right? Like just obviously Devin Booker is on fire to start the season, but they rely on that spacing and shooting and moving the ball and playing basically 4 out with Ayton in the paint. That they might be open to that. I'd be curious where it kind of depends on where they rank Strus, but they're actually getting, the other part of that is, you know what they're getting from Jay Crowder right now? Nada.
But I led you down the wrong path on purpose just so I can come back with, there's not a chance in hell if I'm the Miami Heat I do that. You got a young talent. You don't have a ton of draft choices. You're not going to have lottery picks. Not saying Max Strus is a lottery pick, but I'm saying Max Strus is turning into a pretty damn good NBA player. And how can you trade away? I know he's an impending free agent, but at least you'll have his bird rights. How can you trade away that possibility for a 1-year rental of Jay Crowder? Keep in mind, folks, the reason Jay Crowder left the Miami Heat after the 2020 playoffs was he wanted the 3-year, $30 million deal he got from the Suns. At the time, the Heat balked because they still thought there was a chance to get Giannis going forward in free agency and didn't want to spend the money. So now you have Jay Crowder coming back 3 years later. He's going to want a new free agency contract also. Remember when the Heat, for example, traded for Andre Iguodala from Memphis. If you remember, Kurt, Andre Iguodala was not with the Grizzlies. He was sitting out after he had been traded from Golden State. The only reason and the only way that he got that deal done is they gave Andre Iguodala 2 more years. One was a team option, but they gave him 2 years, $30 million extension. I don't think the Heat are doing that for Jay Crowder. No. I don't think their desperation is such that they would make such a move. So I'm not so sure that Max Strus is not too much in that situation to go in that direction. Look, I can't tell you who else the power forward will be. And in the short term, Caleb Martin, he missed the game on Monday. The loss to Toronto, they were 1-2 with him starting. Small sample size theater. We'll see a little bit more tonight against the Blazers where that goes. So during the week, Kurt will ask me, what do you want to talk about? I'll throw some stuff around. I did throw this one to Kurt, and it's a little bit different than the trades we've mentioned before, and it's not an in-the-moment trade. Kurt, if the Miami Heat called up the Lakers and spoke to Rob Pelinka and said, you know what, we're in a kind of a salary cap crunch. We're not going to win a championship this year. We owe Duncan a bunch of money. Kyle Lowry has 2 years left, and he's kind of looking like he's living in the moment only. Would the Lakers consider a Kyle Lowry and Duncan Robinson trade for Russell Westbrook? And folks, before you go crazy on the YouTube chat board, I'm not saying it's for the Heat to get Russell Westbrook. I'll talk about this after. It's for salary cap relief. But let me ask you from a Lakers perspective, adding a shooter, adding someone who can handle and run the offense and relieve that to a degree from LeBron. Any thoughts on that, Kurt?
They're not there yet. Let's put it that way. But the desperation is coming. I can say that I was there after the Portland Laker game the other night. I got to Staples early for the second half of the doubleheader just to watch the end of that game and go in the locker room. And you could cut the tension with a knife, Ira. Mm-hmm. Like it's bad there. They're not, like I said, they're not there yet, but they're getting close to. And we can get into how Russ is a symbol of a bigger problem, but he's the scapegoat right now. If addition by subtraction, they're not there yet, but their schedule continues to be brutal for the stretching out. If it gets much worse and they are stumbling out of the gate like this, they may feel the pressure to make a move, and they might be open to something like that, just being able to say, hey, we got Kyle Lowry. We got shooting that we desperately need. And hey, we got rid of Russ. It's addition by subtraction. They might be willing to do that, and they'd probably throw in a first.
Well, that's the thing. I think that he would ask for more sweeteners. We know the Lakers don't want to go all the way out with their unprotected 27 and 29, I believe it is. They've been holding off on that. Maybe partial protection, maybe something like that. Maybe a pick through another team just to get a little sweetener. The reason, folks, I'm mentioning this is this. Duncan Robinson, after the season, has about $60 million left on his deal, 3 more years. Kyle Lowry has this season and next season on his deal worth almost a little shy of 60, about 55 or so, based on the production they're getting. Yes, you would be left with Gabe Vincent as your starting point guard. You'd have to bring in another point guard. But while it wouldn't give you salary cap space for next summer, you lost that by going out and extending Tyler. If you didn't, you would have, because his cap hold would have been much smaller. But it would allow you to re-sign a Max Strus, re-sign a Gabe Vincent, and get a little bit more creative. So I just threw that out there for that reason. I'm just curious, Kurt, from your West Coast perspective over there, if you were to have a starting lineup of, I'm going to throw you Thomas Bryant, Anthony Davis, LeBron James, Duncan Robinson, and Kyle Lowry, would that lift you beyond the play-in in the Western Conference? No. In other words, is it enough to do it?
No, I'm not even. The West is deep enough. I'm not sure it gets you out of the play-in and into the final 8. Look, LeBron and Anthony Davis, I'm not ever selling their ability short to rise up in a big moment.
Right.
But that roster, sure, you would still have Pat Beverly and you would still have some other guys you could roll out there. But it is not a well-constructed roster. And adding Duncan Robinson for shooting, and even Kyle Lowry to a degree for shooting, helps. But your eye droplets in the swimming pool right now, man. You've got to. Their roster construction problems are bigger than that. And by the way, the other reason the Lakers would really hesitate on that trade, they don't want to mess with their cap space next year when they want to try to go after Kyle Lowry.
I was going with you next, and I was saying
Kyrie Irving and stuff.
If you add even a Robinson and a Lowry, or honestly, even a Hield and a Miles Turner, you're probably not going to be able to get Kyrie Irving next summer. So this is why I wanted to bring this full circle and mention that possibility with the Lakers. I know we're only 1 week in, and everything can change for the Heat and for the Lakers in week 2, 3, 4. It's an 82-game schedule. I get all of that. How much do you, though, Kurt Helin, balance the future when you also have 30-somethings in your lineup and you're living in the moment? Because the Heat and Lakers are similar in that respect. You have Davis and LeBron, who are playing for the moment, have to live in the moment. You have Lowry and Butler, who in their 30s are playing in the moment, living in the moment. What is responsible front office work for both of those sets of players? Does Rob Pelinka owe more to LeBron and Anthony Davis to say, screw the future, we got to do it for you guys now? And similarly, does Pat Riley and Andy Ellisberg owe it to Kyle Lowry and owe it to Jimmy Butler, who's done nothing but everything Jimmy Butler these 2 of the last 3 years? So what's the balance there from the front office as opposed to, hey, let the future take care of the future?
I think if you are a contender or think you can, you really are all in. You just have to be. If you're the Lakers in particular, I don't want to. It's a family-friendly thing here on the Red Recover Inside the Paint show. So I'm not going to use the Rams GM exact line, but they don't need the picks, right? Move on from those. Go. You've still got LeBron James. You've still got Anthony Davis. Go do what you've got to do to get this team where it needs to be. I think that should be more the attitude. I'm a little more cautious in Miami because are they contenders? I guess that's the question you have to ask yourself. And you came, obviously, last season within a Jimmy Butler 3 of being back to the finals. So, you can make a very good argument that they're there. But the moves you make have got to make sure they put you over the top. It can't just be Russell Westbrook saves you money. He doesn't make you better. No,
he might get bought out or waived anyway.
I would imagine. Yeah, you wouldn't. I don't think you want him there.
Yeah, he's just another guy. And again, it could be even a reserve role if Spoelstra doesn't feel comfortable. Well, if he's not happy playing off the bench in LA, he's not going to be happy playing off the bench behind Gabe Vincent. So you run into that also, which just shows you the Westbrook example is of how quickly it falls for a player. In our first segment, and you can catch this on any of Big O's podcast segments out there, on any of your podcast outlets, we were talking about how you didn't know when it might end for Kyle Lowry. Just like we didn't realize when it would end for Russell Westbrook. We know now when it ended, some point in the middle of last season, which is crazy when you think about that just 2 seasons ago, he was a triple-double machine for the Washington Wizards. He was resurrected. He was mentioned in MVP candidates for all he was doing, or at least all NBA, and then it fell off the cliff, which is the concern about Kyle Lowry now also with the Heat going into tonight's game against the Portland Trail Blazers. So that's the thing, this whole older roster thing. I think it's a real tightrope. And I think you're seeing so many teams walking that tightrope now with older players, balancing the future, going against what could come next. The Heat rarely have gotten themselves stuck to the point where they had to drop to the bottom. I spoke to Udonis Haslem about that today. I was talking to him about Kelly Olynyk and Josh Richardson, former teammates, whose teams are really upset that they're winning now because they want to lose. And I was telling you, it probably means that Jay Rich and Kelly won't be playing much more if they dare to continue to score points and shoot the way they're playing. But that's not who the Heat are. And sometimes I think the Heat, even though they live in the moment, fail to fully protect the future. So last thing before we go out, going to talk about the week ahead now after our break. Kurt, I know this is a big question for a last question of a segment, but do teams owe the future to themselves? Or do you think it's about living in the moment because you don't know, you could be an injury away, you could be a suspension away, you could be salary cap trouble away? What's the balance, the yin and the yang there for teams when it comes to that?
You're right, it's a complex question that gets into market size and history and stuff, but I'm more in if you're at all good, then you live in the moment and go all in. I would rather have a team do what Minnesota did, even though I don't think that gets them a title, than for them to sit back passively and try to figure it out and keep some comfort.
Thank you.
Go all in or don't go all in. And if you're going to go all in on rebuilding, I'm not saying go process, but if you're going to do what Danny Ainge did in Utah, then do what Danny Ainge did in Utah. Like, and by the way, you're going to have to move Markkanen, or he's going to keep tearing it up, man.
Another good name. Anyway, after the break, Zachary, Polly, everyone there, Michelle, we have all your questions on our chat board at YouTube. We'll get to that. Want to talk about the week ahead. Kurt did get to see the Portland Trail Blazers against his Lakers earlier in the week, so he'll give us a full scouting report. We'll also talk about tomorrow night, Heat against Warriors, Saturday, Heat against the Kings, and next Tuesday back home at FTX, the Heat will play the Warriors again. So we'll get into what's next and whether the 1-win Miami Heat can become the 2 or 3 or 4-win Miami Heat by the end of this trip. That's all coming up next on RedRecover.com, Inside the Paint. Ira Winderman from the South Florida Sun Sentinel. He's Kurt Helin from NBCSports.com and Pro Basketball Talk. And we're here to the top of the hour on a rare afternoon broadcast here of our RedRecover.com Inside the Paint show. Kurt, I want to get into a little bit of the Heat schedule going forward, but I also don't want anyone to think we're skimping on the chat board here today. As always, you can grab us on our YouTube chat board. You should smash any like button you see, whether you're watching this or something else. Just go smash some like buttons. Big ol' appreciate that. Zachary chimes in that, that bench makes me queasy. We talked about that in our first segment about the Heat bench right now. And that also goes to a little bit about what Michelle chimes in with that, hey, they're just missing Victor Oladipo. Want to go back to that real quickly, Kurt. Can you, after 4 years of Victor Oladipo, count on Victor Oladipo?
Personally, I just think we're kind of past that. I was a little surprised with the contract they gave him. That said, I mean, they know his medicals better than I do. I'm on the outside. I haven't seen it. If he's back and can contribute, is well worth the money they're paying him. But as a fan, as just a person who loves the game, I don't know, Ira. It's been too long for me to really put my trust out there again.
Yeah, no, and I agree with you. I think I was totally wrong. I thought, hey, he's going to be the combo guard they need. He's going to be the point guard when Kyle Lowry's out. He's going to be the shooting guard when Tyler Hero is out. They won't miss him on the second unit. They'll have that shooting anyway. And he hasn't shown up yet. And unlike Omer Yurtseven, who missed the first week of the season, he didn't even travel for the Heat for this trip. And yet Eric Spoelstra told us just a little while ago at shoot around at the Moda Center, he's glad Omar is out here. He needs to be around his teammates. He needs to get his work in. And I'm standing there actually going like, well, what about Vic? Doesn't Vic need all of that? And Vic has just been so removed from his Pacers teams, from his Rockets teams, from the Heat for those first 2 years. You just got to wonder what's at play. And I can understand the doubts. I can understand when you doubt your body because it's let you down for 4 years. And I can understand the doubts from a team perspective. Yes, they paid you, but yet you've never gotten that. There was never a sniff during the preseason where we said, you know what, Victor Oladipo, he might start for them. And I'm sure in Victor Oladipo's mind, he thought there was a chance he would get that sniff and that he would start over maybe a Caleb Martin or a Tyler Hero. So I think that's legitimate, and that's why it might have been, and you're all right out there in the chat board, a house of cards with this Heat bench to trust him that much. And maybe if there was that kind of money to spend and you wanted to stay below the luxury tax, that kind of money in Victor Oladipo might have been better spent. We'll see that soon enough. Let's look at the schedule going ahead, Kurt. Heat 3-game trip tonight in Portland, right here against the Trailblazers, Moda Center. Tomorrow, Chase Center against the Golden State Warriors. Saturday at Golden One Center in Sacramento against the Sacramento Kings. Kurt, you saw the Portland Trailblazers the other day. Down here in South Florida, we say the Justice Winslow-led Portland Trailblazers, but I think there's some others who are doing something. Talk a little bit about this matchup. What does Portland present to the Miami Heat that could be problematic? What does Portland present to the Miami Heat that the Miami Heat might be able to take advantage of tonight?
There's going to be some Heat fans, by the way, who are going to watch the Portland having Justice Winslow at the 5 lineups that kind of work and think, why did this work here? He's actually played pretty well for them this year. What they've done, though, is I didn't think it would work. I was one of the skeptics. They've put athleticism and speed and length around. They've just got younger and more athletic around Donovan Mitchell, who is back, who is all the way back. And
you mean Damian Lillard, right?
Yeah, sorry. Damian Lillard is all the way back. His explosion, his extension at the rim when he's shooting, like everything is back. Then you've got Anthony Simons has taken a big step forward. Jeremy Grant, when it was time for a game-winning shot against the Lakers, it was Jeremy Grant like driving past LeBron and shooting around Anthony Davis. Like they trust those three guys, and they are a much more dynamic team than they were. They're a little bit deeper than they were. I was skeptical that this thing would come together smoothly, but they're going to cause problems in the same way Toronto kind of causes problems, that they're very switchable and long and create issues. They're more like that than they used to be. I don't think they have a defensive answer for somebody like Jimmy Butler if Jimmy gets going. Like there's just Jimmy's ability to just muscle his way into a spot.
I think Justice thinks he's that player. Now, he has an ankle, so he might not play tonight, but Justice has always fancied himself as the lockdown defender.
Yeah. There's moments you think he can be. I mean, it also like they were struggling to do that against LeBron. I would like to meet the entire rest of the NBA, which has struggled to stop LeBron from getting to his spots for going on 20 years now. So, but I think Butler and you can hit shots on them. Like they're long and contest, but if Tyler can get going, there's some space there. So they're not.
It's interesting. It's interesting. Good. And it's interesting you mentioned Justice Winslow at center because there was a playoff series a few years back when Hassan Whiteside was injured. And by the end of that series, Justice Winslow was starting at center in Toronto in a Game 7 for the Miami Heat. So he's sort of been that Swiss Army knife that Eric Spoelstra always spoke about. I think down in South Florida, it was always tough for Justice Winslow for one particular reason. They drafted him instead of Devin Booker. And I think that's something that's really hard for the Heat to live down. And I think it affected Justice Winslow, who I think can be a nice supporting seventh man. I don't even think he's a sixth man because he can't shoot. And that's been the problem. And the league seems to have a lot of those lately. Good defender, willing to try it all, good off the ball. He played point guard for the Heat for a while. That actually was his probably best Miami Heat run when he was at the point. So he can do that also. Yeah. So I think there'll always be mixed feelings because of what they didn't do and what they didn't get. And remember, Justice was never expected to fall to number 10 in that draft. The Heat did not work him out. Came from Mike Krzyzewski's program, always going to be top 3, top 5, top 7 pick. And all of a sudden, there he was. Hey, it's not like they drafted Stanley Johnson, so it wasn't a total watch in that draft. There was some really bad Emmanuel Mudiay. I think Mario Hezonja was in that draft also at the top. So all things being equal, I think the Heat fan and Heat Nation might be a little too sort of tough right now on what happened or didn't happen with Justice Winslow, but I can understand sort of the wrong move, what happened, and how it made it that much tougher for him. At the top of our show, when we're doing our crosstalk with Big O, who's out, I believe, at Hialeah Racetrack today, we were talking a little bit about the Miami Heat schedule on this trip. Kurt, we use the phrase that coaches never use, schedule loss. If you can find a coach, matter of fact, folks, if you're out there and you're on Google right now, if you can find a coach who's actually uttered the word schedule loss, that's all well and good, but you just don't see it. So my question to you is, can you think of a more schedule loss spot than the Golden State Warriors on the second night of a back-to-back, when Golden State is not playing tonight, when Golden State is coming off a loss, and when Klay Thompson is coming off an ejection? Kurt Helin, and we know this, by the way, folks, Kurt only does this as a hobby. He doesn't take money for this. He's made millions gambling anyway. Kurt, if you were to put a line on tomorrow's Miami Heat Golden State game from a common sense, pro basketball talk, NBCSports.com, your podcast sort of sentiment, just if you were to throw me out a line, the Warriors favored by?
9.5 or 10.
That's all?
It kind of depends on how tonight goes a little bit and what they look like. I think the other thing you didn't mention, that flight from Portland to the Bay Area isn't a 1-hour hop. Like you will enjoy that flight on whatever your airline of choice is.
Hello, Southwest. Yes.
Okay. It's not a simple tiny little flight. It's a bit of a distance. So you get in late, you're a little bit dragging. It's not quite the worst one. It's not. Everybody hates the West Coast to Denver double. That's the one that gets.
The Heat have gotten the second night in Denver a ton. That was the schedule loss.
That's the worst one.
Even Golden
State. This is in there.
even Golden State with the traffic, as you know, you always hear of teams later than they thought, no matter how close they stay there because of the configuration. It's not like when they were in Oakland. That was a disaster because either you stay in Oakland, which no one wanted to, or you stay in San Francisco and you have to deal with the Bay Bridge and rush hour. That didn't work. This is no bargain either. The Heat tend to play these games competitively because of who they are, but in moments of any back-to-back, to me, it comes down to a matter of depth. We've now spent 2 segments on our redrecover.com Inside the Paint talking about how the Heat, without Oladipo right now, without Yurtseven to a lesser degree, don't really have any depth. And I think that could be a factor tomorrow with Golden State. Real quick, Kurt, you're out here on the West Coast all the time. Are the Warriors as good as or better than they were last season? I know the competition might be tougher, but how good are this season's right now, in the moment, Golden State Warriors?
I don't think they're quite as good because they're leaning so much into their youth that some of the veteran experience they had isn't there. But Moses Moody can play. Jonathan Kuminga's a human freak of nature. They're getting more out of Wiseman than I expected. So, and obviously Jordan Poole is gunning for Tyler's 6th Man of the Year award. They've still got their depth. They're still absolutely a contender. I think the advantage you have, probably not in this first game, but the second one is, they don't care about the regular season. They're already bored. They have mentally moved on.
But they will care after a loss. But they will care after a loss.
I think they'll be a little more focused tonight. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, that's the thing with them coming off the loss against the Suns. I think they want to make a statement. I agree that Steve Kerr knows there's bigger challenges out there. Hey, in the West, you could finish anywhere, and by the second round, you're in a brutal playoff series. Yes. If not in the first round, in that 3-6 as it is anyway. Hell, there could be a play-in team like the Pelicans that you wouldn't want to face in the first round if Zion is healthy and Ingram is healthy and their roster is healthy. So Golden State knows it's in for a 3-round playoff battle regardless. I agree with that. By the way, the Heat not only play Golden State tomorrow, but when they come back to FTX Arena next week, their first game back will be against Golden State. Well, if you know one bad spot in the NBA is second night of a back-to-back on the road, another bad spot is first game back after a West Coast trip. So that's not going to be good for the Heat. They will have 2 days off, including Halloween off ahead of time. So maybe they can get a sugar high and come out of that a little bit better. Then the Heat move on to Saturday in Sacramento, another Miami Heat reunion. KZ Okpala gets the start on opening night because their rookie wasn't quite ready, was injured. KZ all of a sudden by the second night disappears. The Sacramento Kings told us they were going to be better. That was not me live by the folks. That was me each of the past 16 years saying that. Kurt, are the Sacramento Kings any better?
On paper, they should be better. They haven't looked it yet, but I will say they've gotten great play out of De'Aaron Fox. He's averaging, I think it's up to still over 30 points a game. He's been tearing it up. And you're going to like Keegan Murray. I think Heat fans watch Keegan Murray. Everybody who likes basketball watches Keegan Murray and goes, oh, why is that rookie playing like a 10-year vet? Like you are going to fall in love with him fast. But they haven't meshed at all. And what's really a problem there, they brought in Mike Brown to fix the defense, which was asking a lot because Domantas Sabonis is not the best rim protector in the league, Ira. So
I've heard.
Yeah. So they're vulnerable inside. You can get to them. Their defense has been pretty bad. And maybe Mike Brown can scheme this and energize it a little bit, but it's a roster that's going to really struggle to make the playoffs in the West and end the currently longest streak in professional sports without making the playoffs, which is pretty horrific.
That's just a remarkable run. My question about the Kings has sort of been a similar question I've had for the last few years. There are times I watch the De'Aaron Fox and think he is great, especially against the Heat when he's hit those winners at the end of games. And then there are other times he's just probably when you're rating the point guards 1 through 30 in the NBA, he falls a lot lower than that. Is De'Aaron Fox an elite player, or is he a player that the Kings re-up with simply because they're not going to get free agents and had to? Should we be in fear of De'Aaron Fox?
You'll know in the first 5 minutes whether you're facing the De'Aaron Fox to be afraid of. He is one of those, Wiggins was this way for a while, right? Like Wiggins isn't that great. Wiggins isn't that great. Oh, hey, once every 2 weeks, Wiggins would tear you up. You get a little more, especially this season. De'Aaron Fox has had a little more energy than that. but some nights he does kind of coast through games and doesn't seem terribly focused. And I think it's got to be driving them a little bit nuts because they are fully committed to him, and it seems to permeate their roster on some level.
Could totally understand that. So that's the Heat schedule. Tonight in Portland, tomorrow night, Golden State Warriors. Saturday, a 6 p.m., 3 p.m. Pacific time start against the Kings. Next week, next Tuesday, back at FTX Arena against the Warriors before we rejoin you at our normal time, 9 a.m. on Inside the Paint, brought to you by RedRecover.com. Want to try to hear on the way out, hit as many of these as I can on our chat board. First one wants to know if the Heat should trade Nikola Jovic for Jonathan Isaac. I guess, Kurt, that's the case. You'd like to see both of them actually get on the court. So a quick question, because right now the Magic are winless. Your thoughts, is Jonathan Isaac just going to be an injured thing who never does, or do you think he becomes an asset for Orlando?
He was so good the year he was healthy. Like, he was such a defensive force this rookie year, if you remember. Like, I'm hoping for it, but it's been so long. I think he's just going to be one of those guys.
No, and again, I just want to go through a couple of these quick, but I agree. And maybe you shouldn't trade Nikola Jovic until he actually plays. By the way, quick aside, spoke to Nikola about his suspension. He told me something really interesting. He was suspended Monday because he came off the bench against the Raptors during that Caleb Martin fiasco on Saturday. It turns out that Nikola lives across the street from the arena. So he said he was out on his patio watching the arena that he couldn't be in. So he said it hurt that much more. So I can get that. Michelle chimes in here about Russell Westbrook. Russell Westbrook needs to go. Kurt, I don't want to go too in-depth on any of this, but is there any chance anywhere? We've seen Miami Heat do it with a ton of players from Anthony Mason going forward. Can Russell Westbrook still be resurrected in some form by someone?
Yes, but more than just going to the right system, whether that's Miami or the Phoenix Suns have done that with teams, players, he's got to want to do it. He's got to want to buy in and change who he is. Right now, he still wants to play like triple-double Russ. And until he's willing to tweak his game, it's not going to matter.
Yeah, no, I think he can. I think it's more mentally than anything. And again, Russell Westbrook can't shoot, but we've spoken on today's show about a bunch of players that can't shoot and still found their way, Justice Winslow being one, to be a role player. If he can be a role player. I don't care if I'm getting barked out of the segment. Okay, real quick, Michelle and Money Mitch both asked a similar question about Bam Adebayo. Michelle phrased it as Bam needs to dunk the ball more and go to the basket and passing the ball and passes too often. Can we, it's okay, Kurt, can we try to turn Bam into something he's not? Or at the 5-year, 6-year mark, are you who you are?
I think he can adjust a little. I think he can grow. I mean, he's young. I'm going to forget the age off the top of my head.
Right.
You might know, right? But I think so. But in a lot of ways, you can't ask for a major overhaul. He is who he is in a lot of ways, and he can modify his game. But I don't like Jason Kidd becoming a shooter is the rarity, not the norm, right? Like, guys don't overhaul their game over the course of their careers very often. I think Bam kind of is who he is in a lot of ways.
No, I think at 25, you still have room for growth. One of our people on our chat board here chimes in here is Money Mitch again, saying he almost tries to play too much like a Draymond Green, and Draymond is so unique. I buy that only because the Heat need Bam to be something different. They don't have Steph Curry shooting threes. They don't have Klay Thompson shooting threes. They are built different. It's very hard to emulate anyone's game in the NBA unless you have the same roster composition. Okay, real quick, we do this at the end of every show every week. We go through the schedule. We do the one-loss game because it's stupid. And hey, on RedRecover.com, we like a little bit of stupid here and Inside the Paint. Tonight, Miami Heat in Portland against the Trailblazers. Who wins, Cardillan?
Miami. I think this is the first Portland loss.
Tomorrow, your easiest pick of the year, Miami Heat at Golden State Wednesday night. Who wins?
Oh, Golden State takes that one.
I really am curious what the line is going to be. Kurt says under 10. I think more than that.
10. Yeah, we'll see.
But you know what? We'll see. That might be based on how the Heat look tonight. Miami and Sacramento, 6 p.m. Eastern start Saturday.
Miami. That's a bad team.
They absolutely have to. Then going back, they're going to have Sunday off. They're going to have Monday off. Next Tuesday, FTX Arena against the Warriors.
That's a tougher one. I'm still go with Golden State. I can't pick against them.
See, I think the Heat, because if Dion Waiters can hit a game winner at FTX Arena against the Warriors, maybe that's a little bit of good karma going forward against Golden State. All we know is we'll have those results by the time we're back at our usual time, 9 a.m. next Wednesday on redrecover.com inside the paint. For now, he's Kurt Helin. I'm Ira Winderman, and I got a game to go to. Thanks, folks.
This is the Big O Show. This is the Big O Show.